Autumn, 1221. Somewhere in the Parwan Valley, Afghanistan. The sun hangs low over mountain ridges, casting long shadows across ground that has drunk more blood in a single day than it should see in a lifetime. A Mongol general named Shigi Katuk is retreating through mountain passes with half his army dead behind him. The bodies stretch for miles, scattered across rocky slopes, tangled in stream beds, piled where the valley narrows and there was no room to flee. His men, veterans who have conquered from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, who have seen 40 cities burn and 100,000 enemies die, ride in silence with faces blank, eyes forward, hands loose on reins. They are feeling something they have never known before: defeat. For 20 years, the Mongols have been a force of nature. They do not lose battles. Armies dissolve before them like morning mist. Cities open their gates or burn. Kings surrender their crowns or lose their heads. They erase civilizations. They turn empires into deserts where only ghosts remain. From the steppes of Mongolia to the heart of Central Asia, from the forests of Manchuria to the walls of Beijing, they have moved like a plague, unstoppable, inevitable, divinely ordained. Until today. Today, 15,000 refugees, men who should have been corpses by now, men who had every rational reason to flee or surrender, accomplished what no professional army, no fortress, no king or coalition could. They shattered the myth. They broke the unbreakable. They proved that the Mongols could bleed, could panic, could run. And the man who led them, a dispossessed prince named Jalal ad-Din Mingburnu, who inherited nothing but ashes and chose to turn those ashes into fire, is about to receive the personal attention of Genghis Khan himself. This is the story of how the impossible happened, and why the world forgot, and why remembering matters. If you find value in these forgotten high stories, if you believe that memory itself is resistance against erasure, leave a comment. Let me know you were here. Let me know this mattered. Because what follows is a story that should have been carved into monuments and taught in every school, but wasn't. A story that changed the course of civilizations, quietly, in ways the conquerors never intended and would never acknowledge. Let's begin where every great catastrophe begins, with a single act of greed. The Khwarezmian Empire in 1218 stretched from the Caspian Sea to the borders of India, from the Aral Sea to the Persian Gulf. Shah Muhammad II ruled it all, ruled it wealthy, powerful, and overconfident. His cities gleamed. Samarkand, with its blue-tiled mosques and astronomical observatories. Bokhara, whose libraries held thousands of volumes copied by hand over centuries. Merv, where the water ran through underground channels and gardens bloomed in geometric perfection. These were not frontier outposts. These were centers of civilization, places where mathematics and poetry flourished, where scholars debated theology and engineers designed irrigation systems that fed millions. The Silk Road trade routes that connected east and west ran through Shah Muhammad's territory, and every caravan that passed paid tribute. His treasury overflowed with gold, with jade, with silk. His armies numbered 400,000 soldiers, professional warriors, seasoned veterans, men who knew how to kill. He believed himself untouchable. That same year, a caravan arrived at the border city of Otrar. 450 Mongol merchants, carrying furs from the north, jade from distant mountains, silver worked in patterns unknown in Central Asia. They came seeking trade, peaceful exchange, commerce. The governor of Otrar, a man named Inalchuk, saw only one thing: wealth without protection. Foreign men far from home with goods worth a fortune. He accused them of being spies, arrested them, seized everything they carried. Then, methodically, over the course of several days, he had every single one executed. 450 throats cut, bodies dumped outside the city walls where animals would scatter the bones. Word traveled east. When it reached Genghis Khan, he did something unusual, something that reveals more about his character than any battle. He did not immediately mobilize for war. Instead, he sent diplomats. 3 men carrying a message written in careful diplomatic language. Return the stolen goods. Hand over the governor who ordered the executions, and we will have peace. Trade will continue. No blood need be spilled. It was a genuine offer. Genghis Khan understood commerce. He protected merchants throughout his territory because trade brought wealth and stability. He valued connections between civilizations. He wanted trade routes, not corpses. Shah Muhammad received the 3 diplomats in his palace at Samarkand. He read the letter in front of his assembled court, governors, generals, religious scholars. He read it twice, slowly, as if searching for hidden insults. Then he made a decision that would doom his entire civilization. He had the lead envoy executed, throat cut in the throne room. The other 2 he ordered mutilated, beards burned off, faces scarred, before sending them back west. In Central Asian culture, this was the ultimate humiliation. The message was clear: I do not fear you. I do not respect you. I do not acknowledge you as an equal. The message said, come if you dare. Genghis Khan received his mutilated envoys in silence. He dismissed everyone from the tent. Then he rode alone into the mountains and remained there for 3 days, fasting, praying to the eternal blue sky, the god of his ancestors. When he returned, his face was calm. His voice was quiet. He sent one final message to Shah Muhammad. You have chosen this. Prepare to receive me. This was not conquest. This was annihilation. In 1219, Genghis Khan assembled an army of between 100,000 and 150,000 warriors. By any conventional measure, this was suicide. Shah Muhammad had 400,000 soldiers scattered across his empire. On paper, the Mongols were outnumbered nearly 3 to 1. Professional military strategists would have called it impossible. It did not matter. The Mongol military machine was unlike anything the world had seen. It was not just an army. It was a system. Every warrior trained from childhood, riding, shooting, enduring. Each man carried 60 arrows and could fire 20 accurately per minute from horseback at full gallop. They used signals, flags, smoke, drums to coordinate across vast distances, maintaining cohesion when other armies dissolved into chaos. They employed psychological warfare deliberately, methodically, spreading terror like farmers planting seeds. They moved faster than news of their coming, appearing where they should not be, when they should not be there. And they never stopped, never rested, never relented. Shah Muhammad made a fatal mistake. He dispersed his forces, garrisoning them in fortress cities across his empire, believing walls would protect him. He had seen other invaders break themselves against fortifications. He assumed the Mongols would do the same, exhaust themselves in sieges, lose momentum, eventually withdraw. He fundamentally misunderstood what he was facing. The Mongols did not fight battles to conquer territory. They fought to destroy resistance, to eliminate the possibility of future rebellion. Walls just meant they could slaughter everyone in one place, efficiently, without pursuit. Bokhara fell in February 1220. 300,000 people lived there. 20,000 soldiers defended its walls. The Mongols surrounded it completely, cutting off all supply routes. Then they waited. Not long, just enough to let fear build. The garrison tried to break out at night, a desperate charge through the darkness toward freedom. It was brave. It was coordinated. It was exactly what the Mongols expected. They had left that route deliberately open, like a fisherman positioning a net. They tracked the garrison in the dark using scouts who could read movement by starlight. They surrounded them in a depression miles from the city and killed every single one. Methodically, efficiently. By dawn, 20,000 bodies cooled in the dirt. Then they entered the city. The process was methodical. Craftsmen, blacksmiths, engineers, builders, anyone with useful skills, were separated from the general population and sent east as slaves. Women were raped or taken as concubines. Young men were conscripted as human shields for the next siege, forced to march at the front of Mongol columns to absorb arrows and make defenders hesitate. Everyone else was given a simple choice: flee or die. Most fled, hundreds of thousands streaming out through opened gates, carrying children and whatever they could grab, heading into countryside that could not possibly feed them all. Old men with grandchildren on their backs, women carrying infants and leading children by the hand, merchants with carts loaded with goods now worthless, scholars clutching books that represented lifetimes of learning. They poured into the surrounding lands like water from a broken dam, heading towards cities that would not welcome them, toward villages too small to feed them, toward an uncertain death that at least was not immediate. Many would die of starvation in the following weeks. Many would die of exposure when winter came. Many would be killed by bandits who preyed on refugees. Many would simply give up, sitting down by the roadside to wait for death. But that was not the Mongols' concern. The Mongols cared only that Bokhara was emptied, ready for destruction. Genghis Khan himself rode into the Grand Mosque, mounted the pulpit where imams had preached for generations, and spoke to the assembled survivors who had been too old or too weak or too stubborn to flee. I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. Then they burned Bokhara, not in rage, not in passion. They burned it systematically, methodically, building by building. 10 days of organized destruction until not one structure stood intact. A city that had endured for centuries, that had survived Alexander and the Arabs and a dozen other conquerors, reduced to rubble and ash. Samarkand was larger, richer, more beautiful. It had 110,000 soldiers defending it. Shah Muhammad himself had proclaimed it impregnable. The Mongols used psychological warfare, dressed prisoners in Mongol armor to inflate their apparent numbers, paraded captives before the walls to demoralize defenders, spread rumors of supernatural abilities and divine favor. After 5 days, the city surrendered. The process repeated. 30,000 craftsmen were deported, transported east to build siege engines and weapons for future campaigns. 110,000 soldiers were disarmed, led outside the walls in groups of 1,000, and executed, throat by throat. Over several days, Mongol warriors rotated through the duty, taking turns, maintaining fresh hands for the work. Bodies were stacked in pyramids that could be seen for miles. The same pattern echoed across the empire. Merv, where 700,000 civilians were processed and a percentage executed. Nishapur, where the daughter of a dead Mongol general supervised the killing, counting heads to ensure no one escaped. Balkh, called the mother of cities, erased so thoroughly that later travelers reported finding only wind and ruins. Herat, which resisted and paid with its entire population. And through it all, as cities burned and populations were slaughtered, Shah Muhammad ran like a coward from his own shadow. He fled west with 2 Mongol generals, Jib, called the Arrow, and Subutai, who would become the greatest Mongol general of all, leading 20,000 cavalry in relentless pursuit. They chased him 2,000 miles across his own empire, across deserts where water was more valuable than gold, across mountains where paths were barely wide enough for horses, across rivers swollen with spring melt, through cities that had once welcomed him as master, where people had prostrated themselves before his throne. His armies dissolved as he passed. Soldiers looked at their emperor fleeing and decided their families needed them more than a losing cause. They deserted by hundreds, by thousands, melting away into the countryside to find their villages or what remained of them. His governors locked their gates against him, calculating that survival meant abandoning the emperor, that Genghis Khan might show mercy to those who did not resist, but would show none to those who sheltered his enemy. His people watched their ruler gallop past on a lathered horse, surrounded by a shrinking bodyguard, abandoning them to fire and sword and death. They cursed him. They spat at his memory. They told their children that Shah Muhammad had brought this catastrophe through his own stupidity and pride. He died alone on an island in the Caspian Sea in December 1220, 10 months after the invasion began. Sick with something the chroniclers do not name, perhaps disease, perhaps simply despair, broken in body and spirit, despised by everyone who had once bowed to him, who had called him shadow of God on earth, who had proclaimed him invincible. The chroniclers record that his last words were bitter, full of rage at the world, cursing his son Jalal ad-Din for not saving him, as if his son could have done anything when the father had scattered his armies and abandoned his people, cursing his generals for betraying him, though they had fought until fighting became suicide, cursing fate itself for destroying his empire, as if fate and not his own actions had insulted Genghis Khan's envoys. His last act was to name his third son, Jalal ad-Din, as his successor. He left him nothing but ashes and enemies. Jalal ad-Din Mingburnu was not supposed to rule. He was the third son, maybe 30 years old, known for being bold to the point of recklessness. His older brothers were dead, captured, or had fled into exile. The empire was gone. The cities were ruins. The armies were corpses rotting in summer heat. He could have run. India was close. The Delhi Sultanate might grant sanctuary. Survival was possible. It was rational. It was what every advisor who survived would have counseled. He chose to fight. Everything that made his father a failure made Jalal ad-Din dangerous. Shah Muhammad was indecisive, constantly changing plans, trusting bad counsel. His son made quick, brutal decisions and stuck with them. The father trusted static defenses, believing fortifications and walls would save him. The son understood mobility, that survival meant never staying in one place long enough to be surrounded. The father fled from every threat. The son rode toward them. He began gathering survivors. Soldiers who had escaped garrison massacres by luck or skill. Tribal warriors whose villages had been burned, whose families had been killed. Refugees with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. He established a moving camp, constantly relocating through mountains and valleys, never staying anywhere more than a few days. He enforced discipline with hangings when necessary. He shared hardships, ate the same food, slept on the same cold ground, rode the same exhausted horses as the lowest soldier. By early 1221, he had 30 to 40,000 men. 15,000 of them were elite cavalry, Kongli Turks and Kalaj tribesmen, professional warriors who had seen Mongol tactics firsthand and survived. These men did not follow Jalal ad-Din because of his title or his bloodline. Titles meant nothing when your empire was ash. They followed him because he represented something they thought was dead, the possibility of hitting back, of making the Mongols pay, of dying on your feet rather than your knees. He formed alliances carefully. Afghan hill tribes who knew the mountain terrain intimately, who could guide armies through passes no map recorded. Saif al-Din Iraq, the governor of Herat, who provided supplies and legitimacy. His endorsement meant other governors might risk supporting the prince. Religious scholars who declared Jalal ad-Din's cause righteous, turning survival into holy duty. He fought a guerrilla war that exploited every Mongol weakness. The Mongols sent detachments to hunt him down, expecting easy victories against disorganized refugees. Instead, they found ambush. Jalal ad-Din's scouts tracked Mongol columns for days, learning their patterns, identifying vulnerabilities. Then he would strike, choosing narrow valleys where superior numbers meant nothing, attacking at dawn or dusk when visibility was poor, hitting supply trains rather than combat units when possible. The attacks were brutal and efficient. His cavalry would appear as if from nowhere, kill everyone they found, take horses and weapons and any supplies worth carrying, then vanish into mountains before Mongol reinforcements arrived. The survivors, and he made sure there were always survivors, carried back stories of the vengeful prince, of warriors who fought like demons, of an enemy who could not be caught or cornered. Strike, retreat, regroup, repeat. Each attack followed the same pattern because the pattern worked. The Mongols were accustomed to enemies who stayed in one place, who could be besieged and destroyed. Jalal ad-Din gave them nothing to besiege. No fixed camps, no permanent headquarters, just movement and violence and the constant threat of appearing where least expected. Each small victory kept belief alive. Each successful raid proved the Mongols bled like anyone else, that they were not demons or spirits, but men with throats that could be cut. Jalal ad-Din remembered the names of soldiers who fought well. He decaptured loot fairly, taking no extra share for himself. He visited the wounded, sat with dying men, remembered their villages, and promised their families would be told they died bravely. His men began to believe again. Think about what it takes to make that choice. To stand when logic says run. To gather an army from ruins. To fight when everyone you ever trusted is dead or gone or fled. To look at 15,000 desperate men and decide that this broken remnant, is enough to challenge the force that destroyed your entire civilization. To know you will probably die. To know you will almost certainly fail. And to fight anyway. What would it take for you to make that choice? By mid-1221, Genghis Khan had achieved his primary objectives. The Khwarezmian Empire was destroyed. The Shah was dead. Cities that had stood for centuries were rubble. Millions were dead or enslaved. Resistance was scattered, disorganized, dying. For the first time since the campaign began, he dispersed his forces. He sent Jeeb and Subutai on a reconnaissance mission west, a raid that would eventually circle the Caspian Sea and terrify Russia and Eastern Europe. He assigned other generals to mop up remaining pockets of defiance. He established his headquarters at Taloqan and waited for reports that Jalal ad-Din had been captured or killed. The reports never came. Instead, intelligence arrived that the prince was growing stronger, gathering more men, winning small victories, becoming a symbol, becoming dangerous. Jalal ad-Din saw opportunity. For the first time since the invasion began, Mongol forces were divided. He could face a manageable enemy, not the entire horde, not the overwhelming numbers that made resistance suicide, but a detachment he might actually defeat. He moved to Ghazni, a strategic location in the mountains controlling routes to India. If things went wrong, he had an escape path south. If things went right, the terrain favored defensive warfare, narrow valleys, steep slopes, limited approaches that would negate Mongol advantages in mobility and maneuver. He sent word across the ruins of the empire, "Come. The fight is here." Refugees came. Survivors came. Men who had lost everything and wanted one chance to hit back. His force swelled to nearly 40,000, with 15,000 elite cavalry at its core, the best fighters, the men who had survived multiple battles, who understood Mongol tactics and would not break at the first charge. Then he waited. Genghis Khan's response was predictable. He sent Shigi Katuk, his adopted son and supreme judge, a man who had never lost. A battle with 30,000 veteran Mongol warriors. It was supposed to be a cleanup operation. Find the prince, destroy his ragged army, end the last significant resistance, and move on to other conquests. But Jalal ad-Din had something the Mongols did not expect: intelligence. Afghan scouts tracked the Mongol force from the moment it left Talokan. They counted warriors, observed supply trains, noted the pace of march. Runners brought reports every few hours: position, direction, condition. Jalal ad-Din knew exactly what was coming. He had time to prepare, time to study their movements and patterns, time to choose his ground. And he had studied how the Mongols fought. Everyone else the Mongols faced assumed they understood cavalry warfare. Central Asia had fought on horseback for millennia, but the Mongols did it differently. They did not just charge. They used horse archers as a primary weapon, waves of warriors firing arrows at full gallop, rotating continuously to maintain pressure, never committing to close combat until the enemy was exhausted and broken. They feigned retreats to draw opponents out of position, then surrounded and annihilated them. They used terrain expertly, driving enemies into killing grounds. Jalal ad-Din understood all of this because he had watched it work. He had seen armies dissolve under that pressure. He had learned from defeat. He chose his battlefield carefully. The Parwan Valley, 60 miles north of Kabul. Steep mountain walls on both sides, rising hundreds of feet, preventing the wide flanking maneuvers Mongols favored. Streams and rocky ground disrupting cavalry charges, making it impossible to maintain the speed and momentum that gave Mongol tactics their power. A narrow approach from the north that forced frontal engagement, eliminating the possibility of surrounding the defender. It was a trap designed to negate every Mongol advantage. Then Jalal ad-Din did something revolutionary, something that shocked his own officers. He ordered his cavalry to dismount. In Central Asian warfare, this was unthinkable. Absolute heresy. Cavalry fought on horseback. That was the entire point, the fundamental assumption that underlay every military doctrine for 1,000 years. Mobility, speed, shock. The ability to strike and withdraw, to pursue fleeing enemies, to escape when threatened. Dismounting meant surrendering your greatest advantage, becoming slow and vulnerable, turning elite warriors into mere infantry. His officers protested. Some openly questioned whether the prince had lost his mind, whether the stress had broken him. Experienced commanders argued that they would be slaughtered, that Mongol cavalry would ride circles around them, that this was suicide dressed up as tactics. But Jalal ad-Din understood something crucial, something that only someone who had watched the Mongols destroy multiple armies could see. Mongol horse archers dominated mounted opponents because mounted combat played to their strengths. Their ability to fire accurately at full gallop, to rotate fresh horses constantly, to maintain relentless pressure without ever committing to melee. That was what broke armies. Mounted warriors chasing Mongols rode straight into killing zones, exhausting their horses pursuing enemies who never stopped, scattering their formations while trying to close distance, dying to arrows shot by warriors they could never catch. But men on foot, standing behind shields in a disciplined defensive line, presented a completely different problem. Smaller, steadier targets that could not be scattered. Warriors who could not be baited into pursuit because they were not trying to pursue. Defenders who could fire back with more accuracy because they were not trying to control horses while shooting. Infantry who could hold ground indefinitely because they were not exhausting mounts. A formation that turned Mongol mobility from an advantage into irrelevance, because what good is speed when the enemy will not chase you? He positioned 15,000 dismounted warriors in a defensive line across the valley floor. Archers behind shields. Infantry with spears. Organized in depth, multiple lines so the front could be reinforced or replaced. Behind them, hidden from Mongol scouts by folds in the terrain, he placed his elite cavalry, 7,000 Kongli Turks on the left, 8,000 Kalaj warriors on the right. Fresh horses, rested men, leveled lances. His orders were simple: hold the line, absorb the attack, do not pursue feigned retreats, do not break formation, wait for the signal. Then he watched the Mongols arrive. Shigi Katuk surveyed the valley and saw what he expected: a strong defensive position manned by desperate men. He had broken stronger positions. He had 30,000 veteran warriors who had conquered half the known world. This would be difficult, perhaps. The terrain was bad, but not impossible. Nothing was impossible for the Mongols. He was wrong. The Battle of Parwan began at dawn with archery. Mongol horse archers attacked in waves, riding close, firing, wheeling away before return fire could hit them, letting fresh warriors take their place. Continuous rotating pressure designed to exhaust defenders, create panic, force mistakes. It was the tactic that had broken every army they faced. But the Khwarezmian line did not break. Dismounted archers behind shields returned fire with disciplined accuracy. They were not panicking. They were not chasing. They stood and shot and stood and shot, mechanical, relentless. The rocky terrain disrupted Mongol momentum. Horses stumbled on loose stones. Formations compressed in narrow spaces. Perfect cavalry maneuvers became ragged approximations. And casualties mounted. Shigi Katuk ordered probing attacks. Cavalry charges testing for weakness. Left flank. Center. Right. Each probe met organized resistance. Spearmen stepped forward in coordinated movement. Archers concentrated fire on specific sections of the charge. Each attack was repulsed with losses. Not huge losses. Not catastrophic. Not the kind of casualties that would break a Mongol army under normal circumstances. But losses nonetheless. Dead warriors who would not fight tomorrow. Wounded horses that would need replacing. Exhausted men who had been fighting for hours without breakthrough. And no breakthrough. No collapsed line. No panic. No victory. The valley was not opening. The enemy was not breaking. The defensive formation held like stone, absorbing punishment that should have shattered it hours ago. Mongol warriors who had never questioned victory began to feel something unfamiliar crawling up their spines. Not fear exactly, but doubt. The first whisper of uncertainty in 2 decades of conquest. The morning wore into afternoon. Wave after wave struck the Khwarezmian line. Mongol warriors who had never questioned victory began to feel doubt. This was taking too long, costing too much. The valley was not opening. The enemy was not breaking. Jalal ad-Din moved constantly along the defensive position, visible to his men, shouting encouragement, reinforcing weak points with reserves, fighting personally in melees when Mongol warriors breached the line. He killed. He bled. He led. But always, even in the chaos, he was watching. Watching for Shigi Katuk to run out of options. Late afternoon, the shadows growing long across the valley floor, the Mongol general made his decision. He could not flank. The mountains prevented it. He could not break the line with archery. The defenders would not panic. He could not probe through. Every attack was repulsed. There was only one option left. Commit everything. All or nothing. 30,000 Mongol warriors assembled for a general assault. Every reserve committed. Every warrior who could still fight mounted and ready. Shigi Katuk led from the front, sword drawn, voice carrying across the ranks, reminding them who they were. Warriors who had conquered the world, who had never lost, who carried the mandate of heaven itself. This was the moment that had never failed before. The culminating charge. Overwhelming force concentrated into a single hammer blow designed to crush any resistance. No army in 20 years had stood against it. No fortress had held. No king had survived. They charged. The sound alone was tremendous. 30,000 horses at full gallop, warriors screaming battle cries, the earth shaking under hoofs. The Khwarezmian defenders saw it coming like an avalanche, unstoppable, inevitable, death itself riding toward them at full speed. The impact was tremendous. The Khwarezmian center buckled under the weight. Men died by the hundreds in the first minute. The line bent inward, compressed, nearly broke. Mongol warriors penetrated 50 yards, 70 yards, carving through defenders who had held all day. But it held. Barely. By fingernails and willpower and bodies thrown into gaps. The second line stepped forward. The third line moved up. Jalal ad-Din was in the center now, fighting hand to hand, his bodyguards forming a knot of resistance that would not yield. And then he gave the signal. A single arrow shot high into the air, trailing red cloth. 15,000 heavy cavalry, hidden until that moment by folds in terrain and careful positioning, emerged from concealment like a thunderstorm made flesh. 7,000 Khanli Turks struck the Mongol left flank. Not a probe, not a feint, but a full-force charge with leveled lances and fresh horses. 8,000 Khalaj warriors hit the right flank with the force of an avalanche. Warriors screaming, horses galloping at full speed, impact inevitable. Fresh horses that had rested all day. Rested warriors who had conserved their strength. Leveled lances that punched through armor like paper. Full gallop momentum that nothing could stop. The impact was catastrophic. The sound of it alone, lances piercing metal, horses colliding, men screaming, could be heard across the valley. The Mongol left flank simply disintegrated under the assault. Warriors who had been attacking a moment before were suddenly being killed. Horses went down. Men died before they understood what was happening. The right flank fared no better. The Khalaj cavalry carved through them like a sword through silk. The Mongol force, compressed in the valley with no room to maneuver, pressed forward into the defensive line and, unable to withdraw quickly, suddenly found itself attacked from 3 directions. Warriors who had been attacking a moment before were now being attacked. The coordinated assault became chaos. Men tried to turn to face new threats. Units collided with each other. Orders were lost in the noise. And for the first time in 20 years of conquest, Mongol unit cohesion disintegrated. The elite cavalry carved through them. Lances punched through armor. Swords rose and fell. Horses trampled men who went down. The Khwarezmian cavalry had waited all day for this moment, absorbing punishment, watching comrades die, holding position. Now they released everything. All the rage, all the grief, all the accumulated horror of watching their civilization burn. Warriors who had conquered half the known world experienced something they had never felt before: panic. It spread like fire through dry grass. One warrior turned to flee, then 5, then 50, then entire units. Discipline dissolved. Organized retreat became rout. Men who had never fled a battlefield fled now, dropping weapons, abandoning wounded comrades, thinking only of escape. The Khwarezmian cavalry pursued for miles, out of the valley and across open ground. They showed the same mercy the Mongols had shown at Bokhara, at Samarkand, at Merv, at Nishapur, at Balkh, at Herat. None. The killing continued until nightfall, until horses could not run anymore, until arms were too tired to swing swords. When it ended, between 10 and 15,000 Mongol warriors were dead, bodies scattered across miles of countryside. Shigi Katuk escaped with roughly 15,000 survivors, fleeing north toward Talokan, toward Genghis Khan, to report what should have been impossible. The Mongols had been defeated, not in a skirmish, not through ambush, not by superior numbers or better terrain alone. In open battle, by refugees, by men who had every reason to be broken but refused to break. Word spread across Central Asia like wind through grass. The Mongols could be beaten. But victory has its own price, and that price came due immediately. The coalition Jalal ad-Din had built began fracturing before the bodies were cold. A dispute erupted over plunder distribution. Who got captured weapons, horses, armor? Afghan chiefs felt they deserved more because their scouts had provided intelligence. Turkish nobles claimed priority because their warriors had held the line. The argument became heated, then violent. Saif al-Din Iraq, the governor of Herat who had provided crucial support, withdrew his forces in disgust. He was later hunted down and killed by Mongols, his head sent to Genghis Khan as a gift. The army lost a third of its strength to desertion within days. Men drifted away in the night, taking their weapons, heading home to protect villages that might still stand or might already be ashes. And 600 miles north, in his headquarters at Talokan, Genghis Khan received Shigi Katuk's report. He sat for an hour without speaking. His generals waited. His sons waited. Messengers stood frozen. The silence stretched until it became oppressive, until men began to fear even breathing too loudly. Finally, Genghis Khan spoke 4 words. "I will go myself." He mobilized 50 to 60,000 elite warriors. His personal guard, veterans of 100 battles. The best fighters, the most loyal men, warriors who would follow him into hell itself. This was no longer about strategy or conquest or building an empire. This was personal. Jalal ad-Din understood immediately what was coming. He had one option: retreat to India. Reach the Indus River, cross into territory Genghis Khan might not pursue, find sanctuary in a land too distant and too large for even the Mongol horde to conquer. But getting there meant crossing the Hindu Kush mountains in winter, with wounded, with families, with everyone who had fought at Parwan and could not be left behind. It was brutal calculus. Anyone who could not keep the pace would be abandoned. The wounded who could not ride, the elderly who could not walk fast enough, families with small children who slowed the column. There was no mercy in this decision, no humanity, just mathematics. But it was the only calculus that offered any possibility of survival. They departed Ghazni with 30,000 people, soldiers, families, refugees, everyone who had gathered around the prince. Within weeks, as they climbed into the mountains, crossing passes at 15,000 feet where the air itself became a weapon, that number dropped to 15,000. Snow fell constantly. Temperatures plunged below freezing. Horses died by the hundreds. Their bodies left where they fell. People died too. Exposure, exhaustion, falls from narrow paths. Bodies left behind in mountain passes because there was no time to bury them, no energy to spare. Genghis Khan accepted the same losses to maintain pressure. His warriors suffered identical privation, identical cold. But they kept coming. Patient, relentless, closing the distance. 3 times, Jalal ad-Din formed rear guards to buy time for the main column. The first, 2,000 soldiers held a mountain defile, a narrow pass where 10 men could hold off 100. They had orders to fight until overwhelmed, then keep fighting. They held for 8 hours against wave after wave of Mongol attacks. When the position finally fell, none of them survived. But the main column gained 8 hours. 8 hours translated to 20 miles. 20 miles meant survival for thousands. The second, 1,000 cavalry volunteered to defend a river crossing. They knew it was suicide. They knew no one would remember their names. They held for 6 hours. Perhaps 100 survived to rejoin the column. They bought 6 hours. 6 hours meant life for the people they would never see again. The third, 500 men, including Jalal ad-Din's younger brother, made a last stand on a ridge line. They were never seen again. Not one survivor. Not one body recovered. They simply disappeared into the mountains, buying time with their lives. Lives for time. Time for distance. Distance for survival. The arithmetic of desperation. In late December 1221, what remained of the column reached the Indus River, the border with India. Salvation. Except the Indus in winter is not salvation. It is a torrent. Fast, cold, deadly. 40 yards wide and deep enough to drown a horse. There was no bridge, no ferry, no easy crossing. They would have to swim across with wounded, families, horses, everything they carried. They began constructing makeshift rafts from timber cut from sparse trees. Work that would normally take days compressed into desperate hours. Linking horses together with rope so they could support each other in the current, each animal helping the next stay afloat. Building floating platforms for the wounded, men who could not swim, who would drown in the first seconds without support. It was chaos barely controlled by shouted orders and desperate organization. It was painfully, agonizingly slow. Each raft took hours to build. Each trip across the river risked capsizing, drowning, loss. Women and children went first, because if everyone was going to die anyway, at least save them. The wounded went next, because they could not fight. Then families, the elderly, anyone who would slow the army if they stayed. Behind them, warriors watched the mountain passes and waited for the enemy they knew was coming. The crossing continued through the night, through the next day. Rafts going back and forth, horses swimming in linked groups, people drowning despite everything, bodies swept downstream, children screaming for parents lost in the current, chaos and death and desperate hope. And then the Mongols arrived. Genghis Khan had won the race. 50,000 warriors poured out of mountain passes and surrounded what remained of Jalal ad-Din's force. 10,000 exhausted people with their backs to the river. Mongols in front, cold water behind. No escape, no miracle, no clever tactic, just mathematics. 50,000 against 10,000. 5-to-1 odds. Even if the defenders fought perfectly, even if every warrior killed 5 enemies, it would not be enough. Jalal ad-Din held a final council of war with his surviving officers. They could not defeat these odds. They could not all cross before the assault began. But they could choose how to die, and they could choose what that death purchased. The decision: fighting men would form a defensive line along the riverbank. They would hold as long as possible. Behind them, civilians would continue evacuating: women, children, the wounded, anyone who could not fight. When the line broke, not if, when, soldiers would attempt individual escapes. Scatter. Some might make it across. Some might reach India. Some might survive. Jalal ad-Din would be the last to cross. Dawn broke over the Indus on the day of the last stand. 10,000 against 50,000. A thin defensive line strung along the riverbank. 3,000 Kongli and Kalaj cavalry at the center, the survivors of Parwan. Men who had already accomplished the impossible once. Exhausted infantry on the flanks. Warriors who could barely hold weapons but would die before they ran. Behind them, the desperate crossing continued. Rafts capsizing in the current, horses drowning, children screaming, chaos barely controlled. The Mongol assault came in waves designed to break them quickly, to end this before the evacuation could succeed. Hammer blows against specific points in the line. Concentrated archery to kill officers. Cavalry charges to punch through the center. But these were men who had nothing left to lose, and that made them dangerous in ways that shocked even Mongol veterans who had fought across half the world. A man with nothing to lose does not calculate odds, does not consider retreat, does not measure his life against the possibility of victory. He simply fights until he dies or until the enemy dies, and those are the only 2 outcomes that matter. Jalal ad-Din was everywhere. His armor stained red with blood, his own and others. Killing an officer here, rallying troops there, leading a countercharge that threw back a penetration 30 yards deep. His sword rose and fell. His voice carried across the chaos. His presence held the line together through pure force of will. He fought like a man possessed, like someone who had decided that if death was inevitable, it would be legendary. If this was the end, it would be an end worth singing about. If these were his last hours, he would make them count. For 3 hours, impossibly, they held. 3 hours while rafts continued to cross behind them. 3 hours while women and children reached the far bank. 3 hours while the wounded were carried to safety. 3 hours bought with the lives of men who knew they were buying time for others to escape. But overwhelming numbers always prevail. Physics cannot be defied forever. The flanks crumbled inward. Organized defense became isolated last stands. Officers fell one by one. The center was surrounded, fighting in a circle, killing Mongols but dying themselves. The line dissolved into individual acts of defiance. Jalal ad-Din found himself backed against a cliff, 60 feet of sheer rock above the churning river. Mongols closing from 3 directions. His bodyguards, perhaps 10 men still alive, formed a final wall around him. They bought him seconds with their lives. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. He grabbed a riderless horse, one of the few still alive, yanked himself into the saddle, and spurred it directly toward the cliff edge. The horse hesitated. Horses are not stupid. They know when something will kill them. Jalal ad-Din screamed and kicked, and the horse went over. Horse and rider plunged 60 feet through the air while arrows rained down around them. It felt like falling forever. It felt like no time at all. The horse hit the water with tremendous force, legs breaking on impact, and went under. Jalal ad-Din hit a second later and went under too. The current was freezing, strong enough to sweep away a fully armored man in seconds. He fought toward the surface, lungs burning, weighted down by weapons and clothes soaked heavy. His head broke water. Arrows were hitting all around him, raising small geysers. He gasped air and went under again, deliberately, using the water as cover. He angled toward the far bank, letting the current help, swimming diagonal. The cold was paralyzing. His arms were becoming sluggish. His legs were cramping, but he kept swimming. On the cliff above, Genghis Khan arrived in time to witness it. He watched Jalal ad-Din struggling in the water, watched arrows falling around him, watched the young prince fighting the river itself for survival. He raised his hand. The archers stopped firing. His officers looked at him in confusion, uncertain if they had heard correctly. The enemy was right there, clearly visible, struggling in water. Vulnerable. They could kill him easily with concentrated archery, with swimmers sent to finish him, with any number of methods. This was the man who had defeated Shigi Katuk, who had killed 10,000 Mongol warriors, who had embarrassed the empire, and he was escaping. Genghis Khan did not explain his decision, did not justify it, did not order pursuit across the river, did not send swimmers to catch the prince, did not do anything except stand on that cliff and watch a man fight the river itself for survival. He turned to his sons, Chagatai, who would inherit Central Asia, Ogdi, who would become the next great Khan, Talyui, who would father Monk and Kublai, and spoke words that would be recorded by multiple chroniclers who witnessed the moment, words that would echo through history in Persian and Mongol and Chinese sources. Look at this man. Behold what a son should be. Not mercy, recognition, the highest tribute one warrior can give another. An acknowledgement that despite everything, despite the war, despite the hatred, despite the thousands of deaths, he had faced an equal. Jalal ad-Din reached the far bank somehow. He crawled from the water bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, half drowned, shaking with cold, stripped of everything. His army was dead or captured. His family was being executed on the opposite shore. His nation was ashes scattered across 2,000 miles. He had escaped. But escape is not victory. He survived in India for 3 years. 3 years of gathering Khwarezmian refugees who had scattered across the subcontinent, of rebuilding an army from nothing once again, of planning revenge that would never come. The Delhi Sultan Iltutmish initially welcomed him, saw him as a useful tool against rivals, a battle-tested warrior whose reputation alone might intimidate enemies. But Jalal ad-Din's ambition made him dangerous. His refusal to accept anything less than full restoration made him unstable. His constant scheming made him a liability. A man who had lost everything and rebuilt once might do it again, might become a threat to the throne itself. In 1224, after repeated warnings and increasing tension, Iltutmish forced him out at sword point. Jalal ad-Din moved west, back toward the ruins of his father's empire, into Persia and the Caucasus, into lands where Mongol control was still incomplete. He conquered territory through force and reputation. Azerbaijan, parts of Armenia. He defeated Georgian and Seljuk armies who underestimated him. For a brief moment, perhaps 2 years at most, he had a kingdom again. Cities that acknowledged him. Armies that followed his banners. A throne, however fragile. But it was built on force, not loyalty. On fear, not faith. His soldiers served because he paid them, not because they believed in his cause. His governors obeyed because the alternative was execution, not because they respected his authority. His allies supported him only as long as it benefited them. And the Mongols never stopped hunting him. Genghis Khan died in 1227, possibly from injuries sustained falling from a horse, possibly from illness. But his successors inherited his grudges. His sons and grandsons remembered the prince who defeated Shigi Katuk, who jumped from a cliff, who refused to die. They continued the pursuit as a matter of honor and necessity. While Jalal ad-Din lived, he represented the possibility of resistance. Mongol probes westward intensified year by year, never enough to conquer, but always enough to destabilize, to frighten, to prevent any lasting peace. Jalal ad-Din spent more time fleeing than ruling, more energy escaping traps than building administration, more thought devoted to survival than governance. His kingdom, such as it was, began to dissolve like salt in water. Governors defected, soldiers deserted, allies withdrew. The foundation had never been solid, and under pressure it simply crumbled. In 1231, Mongol General Kormakan invaded Azerbaijan with explicit orders to end this permanently, to finish what Genghis Khan had started a decade earlier. Not a raid, not a probe. A proper invasion with tens of thousands of warriors and the mandate to hunt Jalal ad-Din to the ends of the earth if necessary. Jalal ad-Din's army dissolved through desertion and defeat. Warriors who had followed him for money decided money was not worth dying for when the alternative was annihilation. Commanders who had sworn loyalty decided loyalty meant nothing when facing Mongol cavalry. Governors opened their gates to the Mongols, offering surrender and tribute in exchange for mercy that might or might not come. His kingdom collapsed in weeks, cities falling, armies scattering, allies vanishing, everything he had built disintegrating. He fled to the Kurdistan mountains with perhaps 100 loyal followers. Men who stayed because they had nowhere else to go, or because they actually believed in him, or because they were too stubborn to quit. Then 50 followers, then a dozen. Then he was alone, moving through mountain villages where people might shelter him or might kill him, depending on whether they feared Mongol wrath more than they pitied a fallen prince. He was killed in a Kurdish village in August 1231, possibly by bandits who did not know who he was, possibly by locals seeking Mongol favor who knew exactly who he was. The sources do not agree. What matters is he died alone, far from power, forgotten by everyone except the people hunting him. He was roughly 40 years old. There is no monument, no marked grave. His body was probably dumped in an unmarked pit. Just another corpse in a time when corpses were common. Silence. By conventional measures, Jalal ad-Din Mingburnu failed completely. He never reclaimed his father's empire. He never drove the Mongols back. He never achieved vengeance for the millions they killed. His story ends in defeat and obscurity, hunted until death, dying without kingdom or family or legacy. But 39 years after his death, something extraordinary happened. In 1260, at a place called Ain Jalut in what is now northern Israel, the Mamluk Sultan Qutuz faced a Mongol invasion force. The Mongols had conquered Baghdad 3 years earlier, ending the Abbasid Caliphate that had ruled the Islamic world for 5 centuries. They had killed the caliph by rolling him in a carpet and trampling him with horses, a symbolic execution that sent shockwaves across the Muslim world. They seemed poised to sweep across North Africa to destroy what remained of Islamic civilization. Qutuz chose to fight rather than surrender. He chose valley terrain that limited mobility. He positioned his main force as visible bait. He concealed heavy cavalry on both flanks in wooded areas where Mongol scouts could not see them. He ordered his men to hold the line no matter what, to not pursue feigned retreats, to wait for the Mongols to fully commit to the attack. Then he struck. When the Mongol force was fully engaged with the center, convinced of imminent victory, the hidden cavalry emerged and struck both flanks simultaneously. Why? The Mongols, compressed in the valley, unable to use their superior mobility, were surrounded and destroyed. It was a complete annihilation. The Mongol commander was killed. Survivors fled east. The westward expansion ended permanently. Islamic civilization survived. The tactical similarity to Parwan is unmistakable, impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Restricted terrain preventing the flanking maneuvers that were the core of Mongol tactical doctrine. Dismounted or stationary defenders absorbing initial attacks without breaking formation. Hidden cavalry reserves positioned where Mongol scouts could not see them, held back with iron discipline until the perfect moment. Patience while arrows fell and men died. Discipline while the enemy seemed to be winning. Refusing to be baited by feigned retreats, the tactic that had destroyed so many armies. Waiting for the enemy to fully commit before springing the trap. It is the same battle, fought with the same understanding, executed with the same ruthless precision. The Mamluk army at Ain Jalut contained Khwarezmian refugees. This is recorded in multiple sources. Mercenaries who had fled west after the empire fell, selling their swords because they had nothing else to sell. Some had been at Parwan, had stood in that defensive line, had seen the tactic work with their own eyes. Some had crossed the Indus with Jalal ad-Din, had watched their prince leap from a cliff into freezing water. Some had survived Mongol hunts across Persia for years, learning to fight them through brutal experience. They remembered. They carried the lessons in their heads and their hearts and their scars. And they taught those lessons to a new generation of warriors. The knowledge passed down through scattered survivors, through soldiers who became mercenaries and teachers, through oral tradition among warriors who valued knowledge over pride, saved Islamic civilization at Ain Jalut. Jalal ad-Din died believing he had failed. He never knew his impossible victory at Parwan would matter. He never knew the tactical lessons learned in that valley would echo forward through decades to save millions of lives. History proved otherwise. So here is the quest. Ion that matters. How did 15,000 refugees defeat the greatest military machine the world had ever seen? The answer is simple and terrifying. The Mongols were mortal men, not divine punishment, not supernatural beings, not an unstoppable force of nature. Mortal men, brilliant men, certainly, disciplined beyond what most armies could imagine, terrifying in their efficiency and ruthlessness. They had conquered half the known world, from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Vienna, from the frozen forests of Russia to the deserts of Persia. They had destroyed kingdoms that had endured for centuries. They had killed tens of millions. They had toppled dynasties and erased civilizations. But they were men. They bled red blood when cut. They died when overwhelmed by superior tactics. They broke when trapped and attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. They felt fear when surrounded. They panicked when their formations collapsed. They fled when retreat became the only option for survival. Everything that could happen to any army could happen to them, given the right circumstances, the right terrain, the right tactics, the right leadership. The world had forgotten this fundamental truth. By 1221, after 20 years of continuous victory, the Mongols had transcended mere military force in the minds of their enemies. They were not just an army anymore. They were divine punishment, the scourge of God, the wrath of heaven made flesh and given horses and bows. Prophets proclaimed them unstoppable. Religious scholars debated whether resisting them was defying God's will. Cities surrendered at the mere mention of their approach, not because resistance was difficult, but because resistance seemed cosmically impossible. Kings fled their thrones before Mongol armies even arrived. Entire populations chose slavery over fighting because fighting seemed as futile as trying to stop an earthquake or hold back a flood. This transformation from army into myth was precisely what made the Mongols so dangerous. Fear did half their work. Cities that could have resisted for months surrendered in days. Armies that outnumbered them fled without fighting. Populations that could have made conquest impossibly expensive chose submission instead. The myth of invincibility became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because everyone believed they could not be beaten, no one tried hard enough to actually beat them. Parwan killed that myth. Not immediately, not everywhere, not completely, but it proved the fundamental lie. It demonstrated that the Mongols could be outthought, outmaneuvered, defeated by someone who understood their tactics and knew how to counter them. It showed that choosing the right terrain could negate their advantages. That discipline could withstand their assaults. That clever tactics could turn their strengths into weaknesses. That with the right leadership, even refugees could accomplish what professional armies had failed to do. It did not stop the Mongol conquests. It did not save the Khwarezmian Empire. It did not prevent the deaths of millions or the destruction of civilizations. But it proved something the world desperately needed to know. They could be beaten. They were not inevitable. They were not divine. They were men who made mistakes and died when exploited. And that knowledge echoed. There is a paradox in how history is written and remembered. We say the victors write history, and it is true in the most literal sense. The Mongols won the war. They achieved every strategic objective. They erased Khwarezm from the map so thoroughly that today most people have never heard of it, could not point to where it was, do not know it ever existed. They hunted Jalal ad-Din for a decade until he died forgotten and alone in a mountain village, unmourned except by the handful who remembered what he represented. Their empire stretched from Korea to Poland, from Vietnam to Hungary, the largest contiguous land empire in human history. They ruled a quarter of humanity at their peak. Their descendants controlled China for a century, Persia for generations, Russia until the 1480s, India through the Mughal dynasty into the 19th century. Their genetic legacy, Genghis Khan's Y chromosome, appears in roughly 8% of men across their former empire. Their cultural legacy shaped the modern world in ways we still do not fully understand. They created the Pax Mongolica that connected East and West. They facilitated trade and exchange that transformed civilization. Their postal system and administrative innovations influenced empires for centuries. But they could not erase Parwan. They could not erase the memory of that autumn day in 1221 when 15,000 refugees proved the myth was a lie. They could not prevent the story from spreading, from being whispered in markets and repeated in military academies, from being remembered by survivors who taught the lessons to their children and their children's children. They could not stop Jalal ad-Din's tactical innovations from being passed down through scattered warriors who valued knowledge over pride. They could not prevent those lessons from emerging 4 decades later at Ain Jalut to save Islamic civilization when it mattered most. They could not erase the fact that 15,000 refugees defeated them in open battle in Ain they chose, using tactics they developed. They could not erase Jalal ad-Din's leap from the cliff, that moment of defiance captured in chronicles by both sides. They could not erase Genghis Khan's tribute. They could not prevent the lessons learned that day from spreading, surviving, saving civilizations decades later. Genghis Khan built the largest contiguous empire in history. His armies killed an estimated 40 million people, roughly 10% of the world's population at the time. His campaigns destroyed civilizations so thoroughly that some have never recovered. His descendants ruled for generations, shaping the fate of nations for centuries. Yet when he stood on that cliff above the Indus River, watching an enemy prince struggle through freezing water, arrows falling all around, he stopped the archers. He paid tribute. He recognized equality. Behold what a son should be. Because in that moment, despite everything, despite the war, despite the thousands dead, despite the cities burned and the empire destroyed, he had faced an equal. A man who fought when he should have fled, who stood when he should have broken, who chose impossible defiance over rational survival. And that recognition, from one warrior to another, is worth remembering. The Parwan Valley today is quiet. Farmers work the same fields. Shepherds walk the same paths. It is 60 miles north of Kabul, unremarkable, forgotten. There are no monuments, no plaques, no indication that anything significant ever happened there. The wind blows through grass that covers the place where 15,000 refugees accomplished the impossible. The mountains look down on ground that once ran red with the blood of warriors who were supposed to be invincible. The world has moved on. But now you know. You know about Shah Muhammad's arrogance, his greed, his fatal underestimation of the enemy he insulted. You know about Genghis Khan's terrible, methodical vengeance, his systematic destruction of cities and civilizations. You know about the millions who died, the empire that disappeared, the refugees who scattered across the known world carrying grief and rage and determination. And you know about a prince who inherited nothing but ashes and turned them into fire, who gathered broken men and forged them into an army, who studied his enemy and learned their weaknesses, who chose ground carefully and fought brilliantly, who won one impossible, glorious, doomed victory that echoed through centuries. The Mongols won the war. They always won the war. Their empire grew. Their power expanded. Their legacy shaped the world. But on that autumn day in 1221, in a VA, whose name the world forgot, the refugees won the battle. And sometimes that is enough. Sometimes one victory, one moment of defiance, one impossible stand, is enough to change history in ways no one intended. Enough to keep knowledge alive when it should have died with those who held it. Enough to save civilizations decades later when that knowledge becomes the difference between survival and extinction. Enough to prove that even the most powerful force that ever existed can be resisted, can be defeated, can be stopped by people who refuse to surrender even when surrender is rational. That is why this story matters. Not because it changed everything immediately, not because it saved the Khwarezmian Empire or avenged the millions of dead or stopped the Mongol conquests, but because it proved resistance was possible. And that proof, that simple demonstration that the invincible could be beaten, carried forward by scattered survivors, taught to new generations of warriors, remembered when it mattered most, changed the world in ways that battles fought by kings and emperors never did. Because Parwan was not about kingdoms or empires or political power. It was about something more fundamental, about what happens when people who should be broken refuse to break, about choosing to fight when fighting seems pointless, about standing when everyone else has fallen, about that moment when you look at impossible odds and say no anyway. Thank you for watching. This has been Informed Earth. We tell the stories the world has forgotten but desperately needs to remember. Stories of courage and defiance and impossible victories that prove history is not just what powerful people did to the powerless. Stories that show ordinary people, refugees, survivors, the dispossessed, can accomplish extraordinary things when they refuse to break, when they stand together, when they fight for something larger than themselves. If this mattered to you, if this changed how you see history, if you believe these forgotten stories deserve to be remembered, subscribe. Join us in this work of remembering. Share this with someone who needs to know that resistance is possible, that the impossible can be accomplished, that one person with nothing can still change everything. Because history belongs to those who remember it. History is made by those who refuse to forget. And we remember. We remember Parwan. We remember Jalal ad-Din. We remember the 15,000 refugees who proved that invincibility is a lie. We will see you in the next.